Men are better at all sports than women are. That's not sexist, that's biology. Like when I saw with the Mayor Pete, like he was going to come on your program and I'd have a legitimate conversation. And
treat you the same way I treat everybody, Pete.
And then people are like, oh my God, if you sit down and talk to that guy, you are somehow like, you're canceled to us. Like, it's crazy, right? I mean, like I would put the most right-wing person, like if whoever the Democrats nominate for president, I'd love to have him on my Fox Sports radio show. Whoever the Republicans, Donald Trump, I'd love to have him on. When did we enter this culture where somehow if you talk to someone, it means that you agree with everything that they represent? Like I said, you know,
well, there's also this crazy way we frame things now. So Andy No, who got attacked by Antifa in Portland, who I know him, and he was on the show last week, and he's a good, decent guy. He's a 5'5", soft-spoken, little gay Vietnamese guy, and I only mention those qualifiers to use their ridiculous identity politics against themselves. But it's like he's a decent guy, and the way that everyone was framing it was either that the journalists, the blue-check journalists, were all saying he's either not a journalist, they take he's not a journalist, or he's a fascist, as if either one of those would excuse violence.
No, I would just say compare the response to the woman who got killed in Charlottesville. Right, by the crazy deranged dude who I think has got life in prison, deservedly so, right? And people were like, oh my God, this is what happens in Trump's America. Totally innocent people get attacked for their political beliefs. And there was a mass uproar. You know, it still is impacting things. I think I saw in Charlottesville where they are no longer celebrating Thomas Jefferson's birthday as part of the fallout from that. They now have, another day that they've replaced it with or whatever else. Again, because people are afraid, I think, to have a legitimate argument. Ironically enough, in a place like Charlottesville, which is founded on the idea of intellectual freedom. And the response to that attack on by a group that is, I mean, it's wild to me, right?
Smollett or the Covington kids. I mean, the way that they just, you go narrative first and then you figure it out after. It's like, where are all the tweets, guys? Where are all the tweets about what a racist, homophobic nation this is? Oh, this one doesn't work for you, does it?
And I think part of the problem is, in a large sense, you can find evidence for whatever you want in the world or in the country on a day-to-day basis. And what we've lost the ability to do, and I wrote about this a lot in my book, is comprehend probability, right? Like, are there still racists in this country? Certainly. Are there still homophobes in this country? Certainly. But they represent, particularly for acts of violence, a tiny, tiny percentage of the overall population. Yet, in the same way, let's say there are 40,000 people a year who die in car accidents. If the media decided to cover car accident deaths in the same way that they cover police shootings, or in the same way that they cover, a mass shooting or whatever else, people would be terrified to get in their car. They'd be like, oh my God, we got another, what's 40,000 divided by 365? I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people dying on a week-to-week basis, day-to-day basis, and yet we kind of get used to that, right?
But also, what is it that they ultimately want to happen to
I don't know.
That's what I was thinking about, because it's like, if I found out that the guy who lives across the street from me was a homophobe, meaning he had an irrational fear of gay people. Well, as long as he didn't come to my lawn and stand across my house and lob, Molotov cocktail or whatever, it's like, you want to have an irrational fear of gay people in your own home. You're allowed to do it. Like, would it be worthy of my time or sensible for a greater society for me to picket his house, confront him, try to get him fired reserve? You think at the end, so now I accomplish all those things. Now he has to move, he lost his job, he's destitute, his wife divorced him. You think he's going to be like, I kind of
like gay guys.
Gay people.
I think that speaks to a larger context. A handshake's always more powerful than a fist, right? Ultimately, because, and I think you've reached the point way long ago beyond the point of, diminishing returns, right? Where if you look, I wish that nobody was racist. I wish that nobody was homophobic in this country. But I think in trying to drive it down to zero, first of all, you end up in this strange world where you have to define what is gay homophobia and what is racism. And oftentimes you're coming around nowadays to owner, the word owner, right? Like there is a more demand for racism in this country than there is supply, which is why the Wall Street Journal had a big editorial recently. You mentioned Jussie Smollett. There is a huge desire to use this as an example of the larger societal issue. And I think that's a failure of journalism, right? If you think about it, journalism starts with story, right? And the story will oftentimes be used to illuminate a larger issue. I'll give you an example. A lot of people are dying from opioids. in order to draw somebody into the opioid crisis, it makes sense, I think, to go talk about the impact on a family in Ohio as a larger representative for the tens of thousands of people who might be dying or afflicted by opioid addiction. But that's a massive issue in the country today, which has tangible results, dead people, that otherwise wouldn't exist because of the opioid crisis. If you take something that is not necessarily a major issue today, let's say that Jussie Smollett did happen, it was still a minuscule, number of people that was going to be involved in this attack, and it's not necessarily representative of the larger society. Yet that's the argument that they try to make. Oh, this is a stand-in for something larger. Well, no, it's not. It doesn't happen very often at all. It's aberrant, much like, and this is the argument I make in my book, a shark attack. Right? Every shark attack gets news.
Right.
Because ultimately we're all terrified. It's summer. Jaws season is going on. I'm sure when you go in the ocean at some point, when I do too, most influential movie ever made is Jaws, because I think I might get killed by a shark.
I had that problem in pools for the first 20
years. Yeah, that's right. Statistically, it's totally improbable. Yet every shark attack gets covered, so we think that it happens more frequently than it does. I feel like we've lost, you were talking earlier about like the nightly news, the Walter Cronkites of the world. There aren't people saying, this is a reasonable reaction. LeBron, for instance, said, every day my son leaves the house, I worry that he might not come back home. And everybody was like, oh, it's so brave of LeBron James to say that. More young black kids are getting killed by bees, wasps, and hornets leaving the house every day than by police. If LeBron had come out and said, I worry every day that when my kid leaves the front door of his house, he's going to get killed by a bee, a wasp, or a hornet, people have been like, man, LeBron needs to chill out, right? Like, but it's more likely, or hit by a train, right? Like, it's more likely. And
you think some of this is just the way we're wired? Like, certain people's brains are wired for that type of hysteria. You may have seen this video when I was at University of New Hampshire, and all these kids are screaming at me and yelling, blah, blah, blah. And then this woman, this middle-aged woman, gets up, and she's screaming at me, and she goes, these kids could be killed when they walk out of here. and I don't even remember what I said to her, but what I was thinking was, what planet are you on? These are kids at the University of New Hampshire. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no violence here. No one's getting killed. And yet you're an adult telling these kids that they should be fearful. If anyone should have been fearful for their life at that moment, it
should have been you. Yes.
But that sort of thing, it just goes to a certain part of the brain that then just gets fed and fed and fed.
I think politicians have become astute at motivating base audiences by fear, right? And I think certainly the left wing has become more likely to do this, but I think historically the right wing has done it as well, right? And the problem is you need somebody, and this is where I think Obama failed as a politician. He is a very logical guy, whether you agree or disagree with him. I think he looks at data and he makes arguments. He should have, as some of this hysteria started, actually, I think he could have made it a tremendous impact if he had come out and said, look, are there bad police? Yes. Look, I wish that there were no bad police in this country. Some of them can't be trusted. But let's just walk through the statistics. The number one help to entire inner city America is police officers, right? Look, here's the data on murders as they pertain to over the last 30 or 40 years, right? This is a trend line that's regularly going down. Here's the number of police that we employ. This is a trend line that's going up. Employing more police makes people safer. It doesn't mean they're going to be flawless. They have guns on their hips. Sometimes they make bad decisions. When they do, they should be prosecuted in a court of law like anybody else who makes those decisions. And I wonder on some level whether Obama feels bad about the hysteria, because I think the problem we had in 2016 was Hillary, if you go look at the numbers of voters, right? Hillary didn't get the same black voters that Obama did. And I think ultimately she ran an identity politics laden campaign because she thought, if I make it seem like it's awful for black people in this country today and what Donald Trump will do to them is going to be awful, then they will turn up and vote for me, which will allow me to win the election. And I think in 2020, we're going to see a reprisal of that. Now, the people in the Midwest were smart enough who flipped from Obama and Trump to see through that on some level. But this is an election that's going to be decided in Pennsylvania, Michigan, in Ohio, and Wisconsin. I think those 4 states. And so whoever the Democrats nominate, I think they're going to look at the black turnout and say, man, if we gotten the same black turnout that Obama got, we would have won this election. How do we get it? No matter who the nominee is in 2020, we're going to try to sell fear to that audience.
You think the simple proof on that is that we once had dinner with Candace Owens with far-right racist Candace Owens or whatever the hell they call her now. But remember a couple months ago when the reparations talk started bubbling up, and then Elizabeth Warren said, a commission, and then the rest of them started saying, we're going to get into reparations.
Yeah.
I texted Candace and I said, I think you've done it. I think you caused such a crack.
Yeah, in the foundation.
In the foundation of that black people have to be Democrats.
Yes.
That they literally now are saying, what do we got left? Here's cold, hard cash.
Yeah.
That's all we got left. And the fact that they're making that an issue shows that one person, I mean, it's a through line to what we're talking about here, that one person that stakes out some brave position that they really believe in actually can cause immeasurable change. Because I really do believe it is directly related to what she has done.
Yeah, look.
And you can criticize her and people get angry that I defend her and blah, blah, blah.
No, look.
And she's not perfect and I'm not perfect and all that stuff. But I truly believe it is because of what she caused.
Yeah, look, I think the foundation of identity politics collapsing is maybe the most important thing that could happen in our country, right? Because I think the idea that you should be able to look at somebody and guess who they're going to vote for is the foundation of our politics today, right? And certainly fear, if it's used to motivate a voter, I think is often bad. Now, look, you can criticize the other side too, right? Nobody's perfect. I think that Republicans in general have overemphasized the danger of terrorism, right? To make people think that they're in more danger than they are. The reality is, and maybe I'm going to get shot as soon as I walk out, and that would certainly be an irony.
Could be my homophobic neighbor.
Yeah, it could be your homophobic neighbor who thinks I'm gay.
Yeah.
But the reality is, we have never been safer, right? And I think about this a lot as a parent because in my city where I live, Nashville, Tennessee, I try to consciously let my kids take risks, like let them get on their bike, let them ride down the street. We are so suffused, I think, with fear as parents. I think that kind of translates through to our kids who live in this incredibly anxious world where they feel like they're in danger. And I'm like, in the early 80s, we were in much more danger than our kids are today.
The fact
in the
that my
60s,
parents let me climb trees in front of the house, I'd be 100 feet in the air. My mom would come in for lunch. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get down, but I always got down. No helmet.
I think about it now. Like I rode the school bus in 4th and 5th grade, got home, got off the school bus, walked all the way, down the street up to my house, a totally empty house, unlocked the door, went inside, stayed there for a couple of hours by myself, right? I mean, and I was 10, right? I mean, and I've got an 11-year-old now, and if we go to the swimming pool in our neighborhood across the street, my wife's like, oh my God, do you think we can leave him here for a little while? I'm like, he's going to be in 6th grade, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, but I think it's just, we have sort of built this cocoon of protectiveness, and that can be good, but not when it's motivated by fear. And I think that's where we are.
Total sidebar to this. Nashville. So I performed. You might have seen
the
picture in the green room bathroom over there. Is me at the Ryman, which is incredible. Grand Ole Opry. It was one of the most memorable nights. But what is going on in Nashville that everybody is so freaking happy? I have never seen a happier, nicer. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on underneath.
First of all,
that I don't know.
Look at the camera, whichever camera. Don't move. Don't move here. No. We got enough of you. I'm born and raised in Nashville. I think the culture of the place.
I've never seen a group, but every single person that I walk by on the street offered to bring me to their house for dinner, take me out to eat. Can I buy you a drink? What can I do for you? Literally, people were, can I buy you a new jacket? People, it was unbelievable.
It's a super nice community that I think. I don't know what exactly it is. I think, one, you get the southern element. Two, I think the economy has been booming, so people do feel really good about their overall status in life. Three, I think the entertainment culture. We kind of have a lot of the LA vibe of creativity and just freedom and individual, choices that I think is so important in life. And but without a lot of the negativity associated with it. And I don't know whether it's because musicians don't have to be beautiful like a lot of actors and actresses do, but it's I really love it. I mean, we don't want to move. I mean, I'm born and raised. I think it was a great culture for me to grow up in, and I think it's an even better one for my kids.
It's funny to me that you made a point of looking at the camera and telling people not to move.
Well, everybody else is out there saying, like, it's an awesome place to move. I'm like, no, we're full, right? Like, how I feel like as a parent, kind of, my kids are at perfect ages. They're 11, 8, and 4. And I would be, they're potty trained. They still like to spend time with us. Like we can enjoy them as a family. I'd be fine hitting pause right now in my life and having them hang out here for a little while because I know, my father-in-law was telling me this. He's like, you're in a good spot right now. The kids still have lots of problems, but they're almost all little problems. As your kids get older, they have fewer problems, but they become a lot bigger. right? And that makes sense, right, as you think about it from a parent perspective. But the city of Nashville, like, you used to be able to get everywhere in 10 or 15 minutes. Now the traffic, there's so many people who've moved in.
Yeah.
And that can bring a lot of good things. And it's been a good audience growth, a lot of college educated, lots of bars, restaurants, awesome entertainment scene. But we're full.
Yeah.
You need to move to another city.
It's funny because every town that I visited last year, whenever I saw something really great happening in that town, like Salt Lake City, I was like, these people are phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's clean, it's nice. And I did stand up there and I said something about how great it is there. And literally people were coming up to me after going, please
don't tell anybody.
Tell the Californians. Don't, you guys are leaving and ruining everything.
It's funny, when I
Denver,
started,
they were big on that
when
too.
I started my career, because I did local sports talk radio in Nashville, as my profile kind of grew, I would talk a lot about how awesome Nashville was. And this is, over the last 15 years. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I just stopped talking about how awesome the city is, right? Because I'm like, I think I've had too much of an influence on some way, and the people are just scrolling through and they're thinking about where to move. I think it also helps, by the way, we got no state income tax.
Yeah.
So if you're out in California, 13% state income tax, let's say you make $1 million a year and you're an entertainer, that's $130,000 a year, boom, that you have in your pocket in Nashville that you didn't necessarily have if you lived in California or New York.
What am I doing here?
I sometimes wonder why we don't have more of our Fox Sports studios out there, because I'm, doing the show to finish the season here, and it's great to be able to do it out in Nashville.
Yeah. All right, let's back up.
Yes.
To 20 minutes ago, I want to talk about some of the gender stuff related to sports, because you mentioned the women's soccer team. Now, it's great that they won. Okay, fantastic. Everybody's happy. But yes, there are economic elements to this, that less people happen to watch those things. It's just reality. It just is. Nobody's saying they're not worthy. Nobody's saying it shouldn't be on TV. Nobody's saying they shouldn't be able to play. But this constant then need, where it became about their victimhood as they were winning.
Yes.
As you're winning, but the whole idea is, we're not going to respect the flag and whatever, they can do whatever they want. But then also just, we don't get the TV time, and it's like all these things, like, this is such a misguided space for energy.
Let's take a step back. I said on my show, and again, this is something that's reasonable that some people consider to be controversial, so you'll enjoy this. I said, if you look at the Women's World Cup, you can almost pick every winner solely by determining which country has better women's rights. It's a fascinating way. Just look at the bracket. You look at every Women's World Cup game that was played. Almost every game, without fail, the winner was the country that provides more rights to women. So it's fascinating to think about. We are, as a country, so wealthy and so successful that we not only embrace men's sports, which many countries do, we also have so many parents out there who will spend thousands of dollars a year for their women to be able to, their little girls to be able to play soccer and grow up potentially to be U.S. women's soccer team member. Look at the girls that were on the team, the women that won the title this year. They used to be little girls who grew up in pretty advantaged backgrounds, right? Because by and large, soccer in America, unlike soccer in the rest of the world, is a sport that elites play, right? It's suburban sport, especially for women. And so the argument that I made is, if anything, Megan Rapinoe, instead of saying, I'm not going to the effing White House, and she said fucking, I'm not going to the fucking White House, which I think sounds different. She should have, in my opinion, said, I have this opportunity as a captain of the women's team to make that argument that I just made. If we can be a shining light to the rest of the world, this is what happens when you give little girls the freedom to pursue things that interest them. They grow up into women who can dominate. And so there's a lot of talk about the women versus the men, right? But the reason why our men struggle in soccer is because the rest of the world identifies great male athletes and they develop them. In Iran, last year was the first time they let women watch soccer in their country. They require women to play in pants. They require women to wear the hijab where you can just see their eyes on the soccer field. Think about that. Is it a surprise that U.S. women would dominate a country that doesn't let women wear shorts or attend soccer matches? Is it a surprise that we would dominate Saudi Arabia, where they just started letting women drive cars? Yeah. So our women's success, to me, is actually a reflection of the ideals that they should be trying to shed and shine a bright light on for the rest of the world. Having said that, the rest of the world doesn't care about women's soccer like the United States does. So pure economics, when you look at this, and again, this is pure rational economics. The Men's World Cup produced most recently, the most recent numbers I saw, $4 billion of revenue, right?
Billion.
Yeah. The Women's World Cup, in I think it was the most recent, like 2015, produced $73 million in revenue associated with it. Now, that's continuing to grow, but the men in America actually made a smaller percentage of the FIFA revenue. I think it was 9% than the women did. They got 13%. So take a step back from everybody. I think in general is in favor of equality, right? I mean, there are very few people who are like, oh, I think because of your sex, you should have less rights than someone else. Again, tiny, tiny percentage. Yeah. So to me, when you look at this, it's just a function of economics. I wish I made the money that Howard Stern makes, right? We do the same thing. We talk on the radio every morning. Why do I make less money than he does? Because my audience is smaller. And the reason why the U.S. women and the revenue that my audience produces is lower, right? It's basic economics. So I understand the argument of, oh, the U.S. women deserve more. Certainly, I hope they get as much as they possibly can. I'm a capitalist. I want every individual to make as much money as they can. But the money's not there, right? And so the reason why the money's not there is because the world, not the United States, the world doesn't value women's soccer as much as they do men's soccer.
You think Trump, every time Rapinoe or one of these athletes says they're not going to go to the White House or fuck the White House or whatever, you think he's just like, hallelujah, hallelujah, this is just going to make me more popular? Because to me, it's the ultimate virtue signal. Like, why not, instead of saying that, why not, you honored your country, you won for your country, why not show up at the White House and then do what an adult might do, which when he walks by and shakes all your hands, say, Mr. President, I'd love to have 5 minutes with you after to discuss some of the things that I'm concerned about. Ask for a meeting,
which he's shown that he's willing to do. Like, this is what's so crazy to this about me. And I don't know about you, but this is what really bothers me in general about the discussion about the White House visit. I would go to the White House if I were invited by Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, George Bush, Donald Trump. The idea that that is somehow an endorsement of whoever is president is crazy to me. To me, it's just a respect for the office itself and the location. And that's why when Megan Rapinoe said the fucking White House, it's like the White House is a symbol that represents everything that's good and great about America, including the rights that allowed you to become such a dominant women's soccer player to begin with. And by the way, and you know this better than me, I believe on election to enter the White House for the first term, Trump is the most gay, LGBT-friendly president ever.
Literally, well, first off, he was basically pro-gay marriage.
Yes.
Which, remember, Barack Obama, again,
was
first
not
time around,
in 2008.
He was on stage with a freaking gay pride flag a week before the election. Peter Thiel spoke at the RNC. I'm a proud gay man, gets a standing ovation. Nobody even knew what to do. So yeah, it's all just bananas.
And so that is what is so problematic and disappointing to me in many respects is, what does she actually disagree with? And that's the question where I think the sports media often does not go the next level. They cover the surface level virtue signaling, right? Okay, the next question for Megan Rapinoe is, okay, what do you specifically disagree with Donald Trump that he has done? Not just like a mean tweet that he sent or something like a tangible decision. And why would you not take the opportunity to sit with the most powerful man in the world and talk to him about it? Because if anything, Trump has proven to actually listen to some of these arguments, right?
Like, is the catch-22 though not for you, because you can do what you want and you can control the content you're creating, but for ESPN, I get it, they can do it at sort of the base level. But then the more they were to do of that, it's the more that a guy like me, who I don't really care about soccer. I was telling you right before we started, I think that I just now flick through. Like, I see ESPN, and it's so, I used to, even 5 years ago, I would always stop on ESPN, what's going on. And now it's just like I know that whatever is on right now, I could not care less about.
I think what would happen is the athletes would get exposed, by and large, because you would find out.
But that's not the business ESPN wants to be in, right?
But what you would find out is there's no depth to their actual political opinions because they're doing other things full time, right? Like, I think if LeBron James, who is obviously super woke right now, because I think he gets positive feedback on social media and everything else, if you set him down and said, okay, LeBron, like, you called the president a bum, explain why specifically you think the president is a bum and what you would change differently if you were in the White House, you would realize, wait a minute, like, he would just hem and haw and he wouldn't have any answers. Like, you or I or any number of people, and maybe that athlete does have some depth to them, and that's why I've always offered, like, I offered Colin Kaepernick, I offered LeBron James, I offer Megan Rapinoe, like, come on my show and actually make your arguments that you believe you have this platform to make. We never see that happen, right? We hear people say, oh, I've got to use my platform. Well, how are you using your platform? To advocate for, like, an actual change or some sort of detail. I never see that actually happen.
It's interesting, your point about how Trump would be happy to take these meetings, because you're right, he does take these meetings
all the
with
time,
these people.
especially with famous people when it's good television ops, right?
Yeah.
Like Trump sitting with Megan Rapinoe on the other side of the desk in the Oval Office, he'd let all the meet like he did with Kanye and Kim Kardashian, right? Like Trump is very cognizant of the amount of attention that he can get, and the more famous a person he meets with, the more attention he's going to get, particularly in the world of sports. Whether it's Jim Brown, whether it's he just announced that the logo, Jerry West, he's bringing in, Tiger Woods. Trump's a sports fan. Right, and I think he enjoys Tom Brady, obviously, all of the talk about the Brady and Belichick relationship and everything else. And so I think he enjoys being able to interact with him as president. And I think he would always have that meeting if you wanted to have that meeting.
Do you get any feedback from women in the sports broadcasting world that are sick of the wokeness when it comes to all the gender stuff? Yeah, that to me is the most obvious one. Like we can argue about some of the racial stuff and numbers and things like that, but this one now where we're seeing trans wrestlers beating the crap basically out of genetically female women, and it's like now the feminists are for that. And it's like,
I think
what are we doing?
Yeah, I think that's, you talked about how do you blow it up. I think you have to follow the logical collapse of the argument, right? And to me, choosing your gender it's wild to me that we're okay with choosing your gender, but choosing your race is wildly offensive, right? Like, so Rachel Dolezal is like a social pariah. Yeah. But if Rachel Dolezal was a woman who decided to be a man, we would all have to respect that decision. And my thing is, it seems easier to choose to align yourself with a racial group than it does to change your gender, right? But the next step from the world,
Soul Man?
Can you imagine that coming out today? That would be amazing. But to me, the next step that you take that is fascinating here is Caitlyn Jenner is a great example. ESPN gives Caitlyn Jenner an ESPY. What would have happened if in the 1970s, when Caitlyn Jenner is dominating, Bruce Jenner is dominating in the Olympics, he had then decided, I'm going to become a woman and I'm going to come back and I'm going to compete against all the women? He would have dominated even more, right? Like, this is the greatest athlete in the world as a man. If he flips over and becomes a woman, he's going to dominate even more. So this idea that you can choose your gender and that you should then be allowed to compete as that gender, it's like they made a joke movie about this. Do you remember, like Juwanna Mann? Back in the day.
But that is going to happen.
That's the logical fallacy of the argument.
I cannot wait till some 42-year-old washed up NBA guy who played like 7 seasons and scored 3 points a game becomes the
best
MVP
player in the WNBA.
In the WNBA, and you guys are going to have to take it.
Yeah, look, I mean, and I think that's honestly what you need to have happen in order for the logical fallacy of the argument to fall apart, right? Like, and I think that's ultimately what spells the end of wokedom in the world of sports, is what you're just talking about. There are going to be a lot of dads and moms who have watched their daughters train their entire life to be able to win the sprint state championship. And then there suddenly is a 17-year-old who is a male that has decided to identify as female and wins the competition by 20 yards, right? Because this is, again, men are better athletes than women. Like, I've got people right now, my Twitter mentions, talking about the U.S. women and the U.S. men debate, and they're like, oh, if the U.S. women played the men, they'd win. And I'm like, the U.S. women lost to a 15 and under boys all-star team from Dallas, right? Like, men are better at all sports than women are. That's not sexist. That's biology, right? So therefore, men who are bigger, stronger, and faster than women who suddenly decide to identify as women are going to be better. And even if they get all the complicated hormone stuff, like, you're still built physically in a way that most women are not, right? Like, you got all the height advantages of testosterone, all the shoulder, strength, everything else. It's ludicrous.
It just is. It's not offensive to say that. When a woman dunks in the WNBA, which has only happened a handful of times, it's like a miracle.
Yes.
Every NBA player can dunk. I'm pretty sure John Stockton dunked once.
Well, it was like, and this is again in my book, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, John McEnroe got criticized for saying Serena Williams be like the 700th best men's player in the world. I talked to a bunch of men's tennis players, pros, and they're like, she couldn't make a men's college tennis team. Doesn't mean she's not an outstanding women's tennis player, but her talent doesn't translate into the arena with men. And that doesn't mean that women are inferior to men in life.
Right.
It means that athletically, men are superior to women.
Well, you saw the way they were going after Martina Navratilova.
Oh, yeah, when she wrote that piece. Yeah. And that speaks to, I think, the danger of actually interjecting yourself into the conversation. Because Martina Navratilova could have just set out of it. I think she wrote an op-ed piece for a British newspaper.
Yeah. I remember there was one season, right? Maybe the first or second season of the WNBA. You remember Cynthia Cooper, who was on the Houston Comets? And she was like running circles around everybody. Yeah. She had great handles. She had all these sick moves. And I remember watching her and I was like, could this girl possibly make it in the NBA? And in my mind, I thought that maybe she could.
Yeah.
But that's just crazy.
It's ludicrous.
It's just crazy.
It's like the argument, and this goes into Title IX, that I've always found would be fascinating from a legal perspective. You talk about extending the logical fallacy of the argument. Football is not a men's sport. Like, if you really think about it, every scholarship that you get in college to play football is open to women. Like, softball is a women's sport. Baseball is a men's sport. Men's basketball, men's sport. Men's, basketball, women's basketball, women's, right? Yeah. They're defined by their gender. Football is open to everyone. If Bill Belichick could find a 5'4" woman who could be the takeover, or a 6'4" woman, or whatever it is for Tom Brady, he would sign that person to play in the NFL, and so would every college coach. Those women don't exist.
So is that the sickest twist to this whole thing? That sports really, because of rules, is the great equalizer.
1 billion
percent. I've never played basketball.
It's the ultimate meritocracy.
You know, I think I maybe told you this last time you were here, but Sue Bird went to the same high school as me. She was younger than me, but every now and again she would come out to the courts where I was playing.
Right.
And she'd run circles around everybody. She was awesome. I have no problem saying that. She was freaking awesome.
Yes.
And it's like, that doesn't mean she's going to go to the NBA.
Right.
But we can acknowledge that within the skill set playing against all of us, she freaking killed us.
To me, it's like looking at the scatter plot or the bell curve, right? Like most people are somewhere in the range of the top, right? And then there's outliers. If you put male and female athletic ability on that same chart, it doesn't mean that some women are not substantially better even than most men when it comes to athleticism. But when you look at the extremes, which are the people who end up making a living, the men athletically are in a totally different stratosphere than the most athletic women. So when you say, Sue Bird's a great example, Sue Bird can be a lot better than most men at basketball and nowhere near the extreme of the most talented men's basketball players.
All right, let's. We only got a couple minutes left, so let's just hit a couple other things. So there's also been a little through line here that sort of as people like you are doing their own thing out of the institutions, and as the institutions are crumbling, I've come to the belief that sort of the platforms, that all of this is going to crumble, that none of these things are sustainable, and it'll be on creators and innovators to figure out how to reach their communities. Do you kind of view the future of the internet that way? Because we're also in the middle of that game right now, which is just, what is all of this going to become? Yeah,
I think a lot about that, because what am I ultimately in the business of? Words, right? I produce, and that's why the money that I've made, I've tended to roll into buildings, right? Because everything that I do is so ephemeral. But I think we're in an era when, and I don't know when it's going to be, I think it's going to happen soon, you will get into your car, which you may not be driving at all, but would be transporting you somewhere, and you will hopefully say, play me the most recent Clay Travis, right? And boom, it's ready to go. Now, podcasts kind of have that, but I think that all audio is going to converge, right? I think radio, I think podcast, I think shows like this, which can exist in both audio and video format. Everything converges, and it becomes an opportunity to distribute your content in a way where there's almost no top down, right? Everything sort of becomes bottom up. And what can eventually happen is bottom up can become massive. And I think the ability of companies to create stars is going to be diminished, and almost everything is going to be rising from a bottom up. And then big companies will say, oh, I see this person, they're successful, and they'll try to attach to them. But I think all the time about, for instance, on television, I think you'll come in and you'll sit down and you will click on the latest app uploads from, maybe it'll be people like you and me all coming together, and like we'll have our own brand, and it'll be under this brand umbrella, right? You can go kind of check, because if people like you, they might like me, and you kind of get an affinity that way. Everything is so competitive. And to me, Reed Hastings has said it so brilliantly. Our competition's not HBO, it's sleep. And I think we're all competing against sleep. I think there's so many, I was talking about this with a buddy the other day. Sports used to be in the summer. I'd sit around and watch the Braves on TBS. I'd watch the Cubs on WGN, whatever other game, because everything else was a rerun on television in the summer, right? Nowadays, I think baseball struggles because Stranger Things 3 is coming out, right? Like my kid's watching Stranger Things right now. My oldest is. My two younger would be terrified, I think, if they got to watch it. So we're all competing everywhere simultaneously. I think the amount of audience will diminish, but I think the intensity of that audience will grow such that people really, really love the things that they love.
Yeah, it's interesting how when you're in these things, even though we're in sort of different worlds that obviously have a lot of overlap, that you start thinking about the same things. Because I've been getting offers left and right, and what I keep coming back to is, for the first time now, just because of the craziness with YouTube and everything else, I'll consider distribution offers. Where it's just, I just want my stuff to get out there. I don't care whether it's that you hopped in your automatic car and you can just say, play Rubin Report, or it's some other way. But that appeals to me rather than the reverse of the top-down thing. Right? I don't want to be associated with these big things that will ultimately one day come and get me. So it's interesting how we all sort of end up hovering around the same ideas. You know?
Yeah, and look, I mean, the reason why I love doing your show is I do think there's cross-pollination, right? I think people, like I'm gonna have you on my podcast. I think some people will hear you on my show and they'll be like, I never knew that guy existed. Oh, I like him, right? And so I think it's going to be incumbent upon creators to find other creators that they like and sort of allow those two audiences to intermingle in some way to create bigger audiences for people of like minds.
Let's just wrap with one other thing. We talked about it right before we started. Just the way money is completely out of control right now in all these leagues. I kept asking, well, who's the guy that just signed that crazy deal? He said Denny Green. And this guy, he's won a couple of championships, good three-point shooter, decent player. I don't think he's ever maybe made an All-Star team.
Lakers gave him $30 million.
$30 million for 2 years.
$15 million each.
That these numbers are getting so out of control that at some point, people are going to go to these games. I mean, I didn't go to one NBA game last season for the first time in my life. I was just more because I was busy. But it's like at some point, these things will just price themselves out, and everyone's just going to be like, I'm not buying these $80 jerseys anymore. I'm not buying $12 sodas.
Yeah, I think what athletes are going to have to recognize is who pays their salary. And I think this is, an important lesson for anybody employed by anyone. Who pays your salary? Where does the money come from, right? Following that thread to knowing how you get paid. I think a lot of athletes have become comfortable alienating the fan bases that define their paychecks because they don't see that direct connection, right? Because the television contracts are signed for 10 years, because their contracts are guaranteed for multiple years. But ultimately, it's the fan pulling money out of his or her pocket that is justifying what you are allowed to make. And I think whether it's Colin Kaepernick, whether it's LeBron James, alienating fans, Megan Rapinoe, for any reason is just bad business, right? And that's kind of the essence of my argument, is that Michael Jordan had it right when he was asked, how come you don't get intensely political? Because Republicans buy sneakers too. He's not in the business of needing for everybody to know what he thinks about politics from one day to the next. And I think as athletes are trying to turn into repositories for political ideas, good, left, right, indifferent, whatever they are, it's bad for their brands and it's bad for the leagues overall.
All right. Follow Clay Travis's brand at Clay Travis on the Twitter.